Here's a big topic today. So, of course, I have a cold right now. I'm sorry I have a cough drop, and I'm sorry if I sound gross, but I have to have a numb throat. Otherwise, I can't even talk, guys. Regardless, I am here to talk to you today about outlines. What are they? And, do you need one? And if you do need them, what do you put in them? All very good questions. And when it comes to outlines, I tend to use them a lot more frequently when I am writing comic scripts rather than when I'm writing novels. I think it comes down to the fact that my actual scripts are very sparse, so the writing typing part doesn't really take a lot of time. And with that, I reach things faster, and without having a chance to plan out stuff, I kind of really need an outline. Otherwise, I just halt and I don't get things done. But even then, I don't think I'm ever really completely outlineless. I'm not fully a pantster. I don't know if anyone is. Probably someone is. But when it comes to outlines, my process is very personal, and everyone's process is very personal. Whatever level of detail you need in order to feel comfortable telling your story, that's the right amount for your outline. Whatever works is good. There's no hard and fast rules, and that can be kind of frustrating. So in order to help you discover your very own outlining process, I'm going to talk a little bit about mine, and hopefully you can take what you like and set aside what you don't like. Here we go. For me, I use two outlines whenever I'm writing a story. The first is what can best be described as a roadmap. The other one is a short-term plan, which I like to call my running outline. I call it my running outline because it's always trying to outpace me. It's running. I don't know. it's what it is. But first let me discuss my roadmap. When I start writing my story, I'll often begin without any sense of where things are going at all. I just kind of find it fun. I just write scenes and just figure it out. It's part of my discovery phase. But after I write out a few scenes, I really start to understand where things are going. And I'll definitely get into this later in the month. But the beginning of your story often will mirror the end of your story. Most times it will be some sort of mirroring of your ending. So with that in mind, once I have a beginning drafted out, then I can start considering what kind of ending I want. And this is probably why I'm so notorious for rewriting my beginning multiple times before I actually start. But it's usually just to get me on the right track in order to go in the right direction, rather than being someone who's just afraid to start. Because that is definitely some place you can be where you rewrite your beginning a million times because you don't know how to write middles. Me, I know how to write middles. I just like to be on track to write the ending properly. But all that's for another day. Once I have the beginning drafted out the way I like it, I can start considering what kind of end I want. And the ending you end up wanting for your story will shape out the major plot points in your story, such as your inciting incident, your climax, midpoint, etc. I use the 7-point plot structure mixed kind of with the 3-act plot structure, and I'll go into that a bit later on in this challenge, but those plot points kind of become your roadmap, and it's good to just know where they are and where you stand with them. And this outline is incredibly loose. It's so loose that sometimes I don't even have any idea what is going to actually happen at these plot points. They'll just be a general idea of at the midpoint, something happens. And as I write along, I reach the midpoint and I can start coming up with ideas. So it's not a great outline. It doesn't have to be detailed. As long as I have a general idea of what the ending I'm shooting for, I usually am okay to start thinking these out as they approach. But even those loose ideas are very helpful, especially if you're trying to keep within a certain page count. With 9 points, I wanted it to be 9 volumes, and each of those volumes to be about 300 pages. So that meant that Act 1 ends in Book 2, the midpoint's around Book 5 or so, and just knowing those landmarks helps me really work on my writing and get things moving in the right direction. If I'm reaching the midpoint and nothing really pivotal is happening, I know to start ramping things up or reconsidering things. And that's my outline. The outline I end up spending a lot more time with is my running outline, and that one's a lot more short term. It changes, but the closer it gets to being actually written, the more solid it is in structure. So usually my running outline is a list of every scene/event I need before I reach a major point, be that the inciting incident, the climax, etc., etc. The closer I get to that scene occurring, the more accurate the outline starts to become. How I make this outline is usually I first consider what next major plot point is happening, what's going to occur in it. If I don't know, then I need to start thinking about some ideas of like what that scene is going to be. Once I know, like say it's the inciting incident, I'll start working on multiple plot threads. So if you're working on like major plot threads, this becomes even more important. Plots typically bunch up at major points, and by that I mean your inciting incidents, midpoints, etc. They all tend to occur right around at the same time, sometimes even the same place and scene. Even if you have a plot that's happening in flashbacks in tandem to your main plot, the inciting incidents are still going to line up in terms of storytelling. And you want your major points to occur close together because it just makes things a lot more exciting, and it really gives a sense of pace that you sometimes might struggle to find otherwise. And that is where my running outline keeps me on track. I take each plot thread and write them separately in to-do list form. Usually I write out character lists. Sometimes certain characters are grouped together in the same plot, in which case they get the same list. But I'll usually have like my main character's plot thread, my villain's plot thread, etc., etc. Whichever character and plot threads are important for the upcoming scene, I make sure to write down a list of everything that the reader needs to know before that scene occurs. Like, what does the reader need to know? What needs to happen in order for the character to pivot at the plot point or react to the plot point correctly? Like, what is the setup? This then breaks down into scenes. I'll go over this in the future, but scenes each usually have one key element that they focus on. When you're writing out like a running plot outline like this, it's good to just be like very precise in what a scene's use is and like what its function in the story is. My outline list then might be like, let me give you an example. So my first point might be introduce the main character as a wizard that can't do magic. The next point would then be people make fun of the main character for being bad at magic. The next one might be main character finds out magic contest is coming up. The next one is main character practices tons and isn't getting better. And it goes on like that until we have enough plot points to be able to reach our inciting incident where the contest ends up being a ploy to seal away all the most powerful wizards, and the main character is left behind because they're not even good enough to be taken away, and then they're going to go on an adventure to save all the other wizards. And in order for that to occur, we would then have to also look at other plot outlines, because just because we filled out everything the main character needs doesn't mean we have enough in order to tell the full story. I'd then start filling out other plot lines, start looking at side characters that might be adventuring with her and make sure they get set up. I would also set up our villains, maybe not outright state them, but at least have some foreshadowing that something is going to occur. And once I have all of those written out, there may be a few other plot elements that are needed, in which case I just add a few extra scenes here and there to fill out what is needed for this big event to occur. Yeah, I'll start all these characters from the beginning, and then once I have everything written out, I'll then organize in order of occurrence. And if some things end up occurring at the exact same time or around the same time, they're very interchangeable, I'll put them into little bundles. So you sort of keep things in chronological order, and then some things can chronologically happen around the same time, at which point I'll just keep it into a bundle. And then once I finally sit down to go and write, while sometimes it will then become obvious what has to come first because it's the only thing that can chronologically make sense, I'll end up looking at the bundles and really start considering pace in order to select which one I move into next. And sometimes I'm completely wrong, and that's fine because it then becomes very easy to just switch the scenes around in order to fix pace issues, so that's really good. And that is the basics of how I outline. It's a little up in the air and confusing, but that's sort of the gist of it. Again, it's very personal to each person. You need to find out what works for you and try out a whole bunch of other people's methods. Mine's a little all over the place. You might like something more structured, or maybe you want something even more all over the place than me, in which case you usually will end up doing a lot more editing. But that's fine too. In the next few videos, I will be talking about plot structure, but not for a bit, because I'm actually going to start talking about the first steps of actually starting your comic, actually starting your script before we go into plot outlines, because as I said, I usually do that after I already have a beginning, so there you go. I'm just a big old hot mess when it comes to writing. Thank you for listening to me and tolerating my sick voice. It's very kind of you. I'm gonna go and edit this and then take a nap and hopefully feel better. Okay, goodbye.